and welcome. We're watching FYI. For your information, I'm Gargi Rawat, and today we're going to take a close look at social media, the rules, the do's and don'ts. Now, the Congress is currently in a fight with Twitter after Rahul Gandhi's account, as well as the accounts of hundreds of other Congress members, got locked by Twitter for violating their rules. Now, this was because they shared photographs that showed the Congress leader interacting with the family of the 9-year-old Dalit girl who was allegedly raped and killed in Delhi last week. Now, Twitter on its part has insisted that it enforces its rules judiciously and impartially, and added it's taken proactive action over several hundred tweets that had posted the image in violation of its rules, because you cannot show the identity or the family of any minor who has been raped. So we're going to take a look today at the rules around social media. Also, there are certain regulations that one should be aware of when using various platforms, be it LinkedIn, be it Twitter, be it Facebook or YouTube, as well as certain etiquettes and do's and don'ts that one must follow if you're trying to use social media, to promote a brand or promote yourself. Also, we're going to take a look at the power that social media has today, why it's become so important to political parties, to brands, to writers, to personalities. So we're going to take a look at everything around social media, as well as these rules and etiquettes and do's and don'ts. Well, to talk more about this, we're joined by Dilip Cherian, image guru, and we have Akash Banerjee, political satirist and host, the Desh Bhakt. Also, we have Pragya Tiwari, journalist and writer, joining us. Thank you so much all for joining us. And Dilip, first to you, I mean, social media, the importance it has today, especially for political parties, it just goes to show this current fight that we're seeing between the Congress and Twitter. Rahul Gandhi even saying that, Twitter is interfering in our democracy, but Twitter maintaining that rules were violated.
There are two parts to what you've just asked. Is Twitter important to political parties? Yes, it's become the go-to tool for most political parties for two reasons. One, everybody is looking to it as a news source. And the second, that as political parties recognize that they need to reach new, younger audiences, social media is becoming more and more important. Are there rules? And is Twitter an ethical bystander as merely a platform? You've got to understand that platforms also have to, shall I say, respond to the nudges of the governments where they operate in. So I would not say that Twitter can afford to be ethical and impartial. It should. But the fact is that there is a realistic aspect to what large corporations like this have to take into account. They have to take into account that a potential ban on them in the absence of real rules and regulations which govern who can work and who cannot is a potential threat to their existence. So Rahul Gandhi may be right in pillorying them at this point of time, but recognize that they've been very enthusiastic when the foot was on the when the shoe was on the other foot. So impartiality is not what I'm going to bet on.
Right, no, but end of the day, there was a rule that was violated. It was, raised by the NCPCR, and Twitter found that, Rahul Gandhi posting that photograph was a violation. But then the other Congress leaders kind of fell into a trap, and they all, also posted the same photograph, and all of them got locked. Perhaps Shashi Tharoor, being, one of the leaders who's been so good with social media for so long, didn't fall into that particular trap, and he, didn't go. He spoke about it, but he didn't post that particular picture because it would just give them a handle to then go ahead and block them or lock their accounts.
I'm not quite sure whether the rule has been exercised entirely impartially, which is why I made that comment about impartiality and the need to be conscious of nudges by government, because I think that they were posted by many more, and those accounts haven't been suspended, if what is going around is true. But look at it this way. Smart people who work on social media for a lot of political players should also know the rules. So I don't think that it's just about the person whose account is being managed, but recognize that, as a PR company or someone who manages several accounts for several CEOs, for lots of parties, we know that the person whose Twitter handle is being managed needs to have people who are conscious of the rules and regulations and play to his strength or her strength, rather than play to what is the need of the hour. Just responding with speed is not the best thing.
All right, we're also joined by Aditi Mittal, stand-up comedian, actor and writer. I'd like to go to you, Akash, as a well-known, YouTuber and content creator. What would you say about these rules? Everybody's not aware. Every platform has particular rules. There's certain things that you should be aware of, especially if you plan to go big on social media and, really use its power.
So, Gargi, of course, there are political shades to it. There is no denying that.
Sure.
But before we get into the political shades of it, let's just get one thing absolutely clear. Twitter's policies are a train wreck. I've been on Twitter for 10 years. I've spent way too much time on this platform than I should have. It's not healthy. And we operate on other platforms also. We have 3.5 million followers on Deshbhakt across Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. And policies are pretty much well defined on other platforms. You don't see other platforms land up in so much controversy every other day. So there is clearly a problem as far as policy is concerned. Just to carry on with what Dilip was saying is, look at the fact of Mohan Bhagwat's verification being taken away. Now, it was taken away. Is it that Mohan Bhagwat started tweeting to get the verification badge back? The rule is very simple. If you are a verified person and if you don't tweet for a year, your verification badge goes. So what happened after the verification badge went? There was ruckus, and within a few hours, Twitter responded. So the problem here is, A, there are no clear rules because victims of rape and their families have been displayed by other members of other political parties, and we haven't seen this sort of a massive reaction from Twitter. So I don't believe that it is only a question of rules and regulations. It seems that, as Dilip was also saying, rules and regulations have been selectively applied, because I can take out many other instances also. And Gargi, this is just coming days after the government has told the courts that it seems prima facie that Twitter has now been following the new social media guidelines. And within a few days, this is happening. Lastly, 5,000 plus accounts being deactivated. Is Twitter sleeping? Is a foreign social media companies interfering in the internal politics of this country and the government is not bothered? Instead, the government is actually celebrating this. This is beyond a political party fight. So there are very clear issues here of rules and regulations being selectively applied. There are clear instances where Twitter would have reacted differently had it been the government.
But it's because the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights really raised this strongly with Twitter, and that's why they had to go ahead and yes, you're right. I mean, NCPC, I hope they follow this case as closely as they have. But yes, go ahead and tell us also about what your advice to other content creators or people who are trying to use these platforms.
Okay, since we want this discussion to be more useful as well and not just politics, here are some basic facts. Since I got a call from you, I've just been thinking about what we do. These are some of the hygiene practices that we do if you don't want your account to be locked out, if you don't want to get into trouble. The first thing that followers of Rahul Gandhi did was change their DP and the name Rahul Gandhi. It's a trap that they walked into. Very clearly, the Twitter rules are very clear. Whether they apply it everywhere, I don't know, but in this case, they applied it. Do not change your face, your DP, and your picture without mentioning that this is either a parody or you're doing it in support of a particular leader. Nothing should come across as if you're trying to impersonate that person. No impersonation, it does get you into problem. B, do not abuse or give violent threats. The one thing that at least social media platforms are waking up to is any sort of threat. I'm not saying that every time women are threatened on social media, there is action, but threat is something that is taken seriously. So do not abuse, do not give threats. C, don't rush into breaking news. What happens is that when you start becoming NDTV on your own social media platform, you do land up into a little bit of a problem. Why? We wait. We wait for confirmation and then we talk about it. You are not a news channel, so don't do anything that will get you. There are a lot of social media people who get into legal problems because they rush to break news. So don't do that. These are some of the basic hygienes that we follow, Gargi.
No, very, very important points there. Aditi, if you could, you're somebody who's used social media a lot. You're very well known. You're a personality. You're very feisty on social media. Anything that you look out for or watch out for when you're posting?
Gargi, so well said. I have been putting my foot in my mouth on social media for about 10 years now. And what a journey it's been. It has, the purpose and the field of social media and how we use it has changed drastically over the past 10 years. And In fact, one of the things that I would advise anyone who is listening is the more followers you have, the more your responsibility increases to sort of verify. Even if you're not an NDTV yourself, you still have a responsibility to the microphone that you're holding, to the number of people that you're speaking to put out factual information or information as factually as you can check it to be. And the other thing, I mean, of course, just don't harass and abuse people. You wouldn't do it on the streets. Don't do it. I mean, if you would do it on the streets, then do it on social media. Who am I to stop your natural talents? But don't, if you wouldn't harass and, you know, abuse someone in real life, don't do it on social media.
All right, and anything that's bothered you in terms of, you know, the way people interact with you, besides, of course, trolling, you know, overly tagging you, all these sort of things are also something that now is being looked at very closely in terms of etiquettes of social media.
Oh, you know, I think, I mean, so I've been tagged in so many pictures in which I'm not, that now people think I am a 24-year-old like man from Bihar, which with this current haircut is not a very far stretch. But there has been, you know, the sort of the hygiene is now also leaking out into our real lives, right? Where our employers will look at the tweets we've put out. They will look at the way we talk to people online. It's the way we interact with certain pieces of information online. That sort of determines whether we get a promotion, whether we get a job, and which sort of determines our network, which is a huge part of who we are. I think in, you know, especially upper caste, upper class, this is how we interact with people. Our networks are very important, and our networks are then determined by the way we interact with people online.
All right, Pragya, what would you add to this, you know, aspect of etiquettes of social media, you know, because brands, corporates, you know, authors, everybody's trying to harness social media to promote themselves, to promote their product, to promote their books.
Just two quick things, Gargi. I think everyone's covered it quite well and comprehensively, but as somebody who's been a journalist for more number of years than I can care to count, you know, the one thing we know instinctively is that when a story breaks, when it comes to us, you know, editors or reporters' instinct immediately is, we don't know what really happened. Okay, that's your instinct. If that is not your instinct after 10 years of being an editor and a reporter, I don't know what you were doing in a newsroom. So you apply the same thing to social media. Don't get onto the bandwagon of, you know, garnering more, you know, followers simply because outrage gets you more followers. Even if you want to raise concern, then flag and say this is not being confirmed until and unless a channel like yours or a journalist I trust or somebody I know is on the field. And I have done that in the past. I am, of course, an exception because I have those networks. I know a lot of journalist friends, so I can actually call them up and say, do you have any confirmation on this? Do you know anybody who can confirm this, etc. So that's one thing. But there is also another side that nobody's flagged, that, you know, which actually Aditi flagged, that it's not just the social media platforms. It's also other people kind of trying to censor your vibe and say, I've been told all kinds of things, that we want to be taken seriously as a journalist. Don't wear this. Don't post a, you know, picture of a glass of wine. And, you know, so I would urge everybody to, you know, disregard all those kind of things and just be yourself. And that's what social media does. It empowers you to be yourself and find your own tribe. So don't get too caught up in that. There's also the other side. But there is, I will take one more minute to just mention one thing. You know, for all the gyan that we're giving over here, hopefully it's helpful. But frankly, I don't know what will get me censored. I mean, case in point being a dear friend and writer and poet Salil Tripathi, who writes a poem in remembrance of his dead mother, and his account is suspended by Twitter because apparently there was some mention of a riot in that poem, but it was not a political poem in the, you know, in the correct sense of the word. Now, the problematic issue here is, like Akash said, that these guidelines are a train wreck. We are you know, we've been trying to predict what Twitter thinks and how Twitter thinks, and we've gotten nowhere absolutely in over a decade. Now, why this is problematic is, you mentioned that the National Committee for Protection of Child Rights raised an issue. But let's remember one thing, that it's a statutory body, but it can only make recommendations. It is not binding under the IT Act. What that means is that the decision finally rests with Twitter. Now, when Twitter is making a decision so huge, which like Rahul Gandhi correctly says, has the potential to interfere with the political process of a country, get in the way of millions of people being able to access the voice of the opposition. It's him, it's his party's account, it's 5,000 of his party workers. When you are making a decision like that, there are two: either there is a government order, right? In which case you make it absolutely, Twitter should put it front and center and tell us that this is the government order that is binding on us that we have received. And if it hasn't, then it owes it to the people to tell us what its internal policies are, how they've been devised, because in the end, it's a corporation based out of the US, and it's deeply, deeply problematic that a corporation from another country or a private corporation, even in India, acquires the power to determine political outcomes, political processes of a country. This is hugely problematic.
Right.
One more layer to this, which is, one can be like Dilip pointed out. We can't be faulted in the end for wondering if this is if there's been a nudge from the government, if this is just appeasement of the government. And I'd just like to remind people what has been happening in the past couple of months. Twitter's had a standoff with the government about tweets about the farmer protest. There's been a raid. Twitter has issued a statement saying it's worried about the safety and security of its employees in India. New IT rules have been formulated. Maheshwari has been summoned by the police, UP police, for a particular tweet, and the Karnataka High Court called it arm twisting and malafide. Criminal cases, FIRs have been filed against employees. When in the backdrop of all of this, you will excuse people for wondering if this is simply appeasement.
All right. Well, that's a lot about the whole, political controversy right now and what the Congress says. And we'll slip into a short break and come back with more around social media and the do's and don'ts and the rules and regulations. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're talking about social media rules and etiquettes, and we have just time for final words. So Dilip, first to you, this point about recruiters looking at people's social media. So one needs to be a little, careful about the kind of things you put out there if that's how people are going to judge you.
Sure. As somebody who hires a lot of people, that is one of the factors which weighs in when you're looking at somebody. You want to know what their profile is. But I wanted to just raise one thing. People like Pragya, Aditi, Akash, everybody, we must also recognize that we must not be dependent on any, Akash already mentioned it, on any one channel. That's very important. And in addition, we must also, if you want to be seriously heard and you think that what you say is important, which is your own self-estimation, try and have your own platform, which means not creating your own Twitter or something, but owned media is fundamentally important. So Rahul Gandhi should be able to continue to communicate if people knew where to go to get his comments on something. So I think that this is a trap we've all fallen into, a trap of convenience, but we need to recognize this is something that's important.
He had to use Instagram to talk about the controversy with Twitter. Akash?
Just to take Dilip's point further, I have always heard the Congress criticize that there is Godi media and they're not listened to. What prevents you from investing into your own news channels where you can have your own propaganda? Sorry, that's politics. And that's something that the government has done very well. Just one point about whether this is a coincidence or not. It took a Washington Post, if I'm not wrong, report about what Facebook was doing here and the whole Ankhi Das controversy finally leading to the exit of Ankhi Das. So there is, of course, no smoke without some sort of fire or something that is going wrong. It's an open secret what Facebook was doing at this point of time. That report still stands, and Ankhi Das had to quit to, quote unquote, follow her public service dream, etc., etc. Same thing is happening here on Twitter. There is something of a problem. And also, mind you, Gargi, I have been on this platform. I have never seen 5,000 accounts being permanently suspended because of impersonation. If somebody is being impersonated, either you delete, you change your your account is temporarily suspended. What is this whole business of permanent suspension of an account just because I've changed the name and DP? So there is some sort of an activity that is going on. We are not very clear.
Right.
Why are we not clear? Why doesn't it happen with YouTube? Because YouTube says, for example, they take off Deshbhakt tomorrow. they will give a report, a transparency report saying that we took this channel down because the government asked for it. All one should know as a citizen is that is this a government case, is this a legal case or not, which we don't.
All right, and Twitter India head Manish Maheshwari has already taken another role in the US, some US-based role. Yes, Pragya, a final word from you.
3 quick tips. We've said a lot about the politics. This is more general tips. One is, guys, not enough people follow this, but please attribute, if you use media, if you use somebody's quote, if you use somebody's tweet, picture, Instagram, whatever, attribute to people. It's a great source for a democratic platform, all of them, Instagram, Twitter, for creators, for people who are coming up with their own stuff. Don't steal it. That's number 1. Number 2, ironic retweets are a thing of the past if you really want to be concerned about what might happen to you legally. I believe it was, I may be wrong, I believe it was Raghav Chadha who was sued for criminal defamation for retweeting something against Mr. Jaitley. But other cases have also happened. So please qualify your retweets with quote tweets. Don't ironically retweet something because it could land you into trouble. And finally, just to add to something that Dilip said and Akash said, a very good way to make sure that you don't lose your followers if you're banned from a platform, or if like TikTok or platform
to have a backup platform. Okay. Sorry, I'll have to interrupt you there. Aditi, last word to you.
Yeah. See, I mean, how appropriate for this debate. I just wanted to say, irony and sarcasm is difficult to comprehend on merely in text. So make sure
for a
that
stand-up comedian like you, it must be so difficult, to put your views out there, or witty ones. Yes.
And also don't spam people. Don't spam people. Space out your spam. Even if you have to.
Well, thank you all for joining us on this program, and a very important issue, very political right now, but also something that concerns everyone, and how to use social media to your benefit. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.